Good evening, good evening, good evening, everyone. Hopefully, you can hear me just fine. And welcome to Soul Vitamins with our special guest, Rod Saunders from Jew and Greek, which we are also hosting this to his page and sites on Facebook and YouTube. And Rod, if you, it looks like you got it finally got it dialed in. You want to give me a thumbs up? Let me know you're good to go. Ah, he's ready. Okay, so let's bring in Brother Rod. Yeah.
Just kidding. My audio is working.
Well, it didn't help that like we could hear your breath when you did.
Oh, okay. I should have hit the mute button, I guess.
Yeah, I've been like, send me into an immediate panic. No, we don't panic over here. So yeah, before we get going, I actually have an interesting. I'm very curious. From Unifield, asked, can you do a video on born again barbarian? Who is born again barbarian, or what is a born again barbarian? Do you know what that is?
Mm-mm.
All right, Unifield, you're gonna have to tell us what is or who is the born again barbarian. And Patrick said he interesting that just popped up as he's been watching your older tapes. I didn't know. Did you have tapes, or that was? Are you just showing your age, Patrick, calling his YouTube videos tapes?
I don't ever remember that name, so I don't think I've done any videos.
Well,
Don't know. Oh, by the way, I do not know how to enter text into the chat box from Restream, so I may miss some comments here. It's not because I'm ignoring you guys.
gotcha. Well, I can if I put them on the screen as they're coming in, you can see them when I put them up. Like you can see this.
I
When I
can
put up
see them.
there.
I just don't have a prompt box.
Okay. All right. Well, don't worry about it. Hopefully you'll be doing most of the talking tonight, and I'll
Okay.
be typing. He said, Unifield says he's a KJV only cessationist on YouTube. You mean like Kent Hovind? Doo-doonch.
Oh, let's see. There's well, what's that guy's name? From Kentucky. He's a KJV only guy. Independent Fundamental Baptist. His name eludes me at the moment. There's a few KJV only
More
cessationist
than a
guys
few.
out there. Yeah.
More than a few. There's a church in between my house and the congregation where I serve, and it's got that on the side of the building. I keep on meaning to take a picture. Oh, Spencer Smith. Oh no,
Yeah.
you Spencer Smith? Who you talking about?
Yeah. Spencer
Oh
Smith.
man, it's the guy that was supposedly a missionary or something for a year or whatnot. That guy goes hard in the paint, man. He's a little bit much.
Yeah.
But we'll do. You know what, Rod? We're gonna have to have you back for just to talk about the discernment. What do they call them? They call themselves discernment ministries.
Discernment ministries. I call them discernment hacks.
Yeah, but there's something else they call themselves. Discernment ministries, watchdog. There's another one, another title that they like to.
Apologetics, discernment. I don't know.
Heretic hunters. I think
Well,
that's.
they don't call themselves that.
No, I think I don't know if you coined that or Bishop Paladino. Yeah, Unifield. We can chat and we can throw up your chats. So we can throw them up there. So we're getting everybody practicing because you need to everybody. So before we get into the conversation this evening, I need everybody to go to the Soul Vitamins channel or Rod's channel or my channel and save this episode and make sure you have your notifications on, because we are going to have the world-renowned creation scientist Dr. Grady McMurtry here on Thursday night, 7:00 Eastern Standard Time. And I am pumped for that conversation. I am pumped for that interview. It's going to be fantastic. Yeah, there's Dr. Grady's book. I don't know if I can show that. I think I can if I do it this way. If I go Placow, there we go. So make sure you get. Oh,
Hey.
yeah. That's what happens when you don't have. I need like an Iron Man, old school Batman. I need more screens.
Just like a hall of mirrors.
Yes. Okay, so let's get going tonight with the subject. What is the subject? Are science and Christianity compatible? And I thought we'd kick it off with you sharing how you went from you were raised Baptist. You've come from theistic evolution to now creationism, or as most fundamental evangelicals believe. I actually really despise that when people put things in that term because it makes it sound dirty, like, oh, you're just a fundamental evangelical. I'm like, no, I just believe the Bible.
Mhm.
Of course, then again, everybody says that, right?
Right.
So walk us through, like, where were you before you were a theistic evolutionist, and how did you go from theistic evolution to believing in the biblical narrative of creation?
No, we got about a half century to cover here.
Yeah, we got
Uh,
plenty
of
of time. Yeah,
course,
we got some time.
I grew up in a church that didn't teach evolution, didn't believe in evolution, but I went to public schools where evolution was taught.
Yep.
And I pretty much believed in the biblical Genesis account of creation until I was probably in my 40s. And then as I got into the secular business world, the corporate world, got around a lot of educated people, um, I just started gravitating, I guess, toward more of a secular view on a lot of things. And I was not as spiritual as I am today. I went through a period there where I didn't read the Bible much, and I read a lot of science, technical stuff. Just things that I didn't go to a university, but I did start reading a lot of that kind of material, and I just fell into it. I said, well, if you believe the Bible, but you also believe in science, then you would have to consider yourself a theistic evolutionist because evolution is settled science,
Yeah.
or so I was told. And so I
Yeah.
held to that view for many years. And then about 10 years ago, my friend Marcus heard me say something along those lines. And he said, I got a couple of videos I want you to watch. And they were from the Discovery Institute. And Stephen Meyer and Michael Behe, all those guys, if you're familiar with those names.
Oh yeah.
And these guys are part of the intelligent design movement. And I didn't really know what intelligent design was. I kept
I
hearing
can.
it was just a warmed over version of creationism. They call it creationism 2.0. And so I really didn't pay much attention until I watched that video. And I heard these guys who have degrees from accredited, I mean, these are not just guys that claim to be scientists. They've published papers, they've got doctorates from accepted universities and so forth. And Stephen Meyer was explaining the intricacies of the cell, and DNA is genetic programming. And by that time, I was in the computer field. I had actually studied programming for a while, and I really automatically just grasped what he was saying because, and I've done a video on this, that DNA is like a base for programming language. Instead of
Yes.
binary that we're used to with zeros and ones,
Yeah.
it's more like 0, 1, 2, and 3. Much more powerful, much more sophisticated, but much more complicated. And
Yes.
I thought, if that is the most sophisticated programming language out there, that has all the information to create proteins and build life forms, how did that come about from
Mm,
natural selection, from wind, rain, and erosion, and purely natural forces? I don't get it. I've studied programming enough to know that you have to put a lot of thought into it.
yeah.
And then I started watching Michael Behe talk about molecular machines and how basically there's what they call a bacterial flagellum. And he
Yeah.
said basically it swims around inside the cell with what's essentially an outboard motor, like a boat, only it turns, very sharp corners, and it moves at a rate that man has not been able to build anything for the water that can do what the bacterial flagellar does. So I started watching all that stuff, and I said, this is design, this is engineering and programming. And how do you get that from just randomness?
Chance.
It didn't make sense to me. And the more I read on this, the more I realized I had never really studied evolution. I didn't know that was the premise of evolution, is just pure randomness. And you don't get randomness. I mean, you don't get design and engineering and programming that
Order
way.
does not come out of chaos.
Right. And so I just had to admit, I just decided evolution was settled science without ever even studying it. And once I found out what it was, I said, that doesn't work. And so I abandoned theistic evolution and went back to a more Genesis-oriented view of creation.
Yeah. I tell you what's interesting. So I threw up Dr. Stevens a little, just the first sentence of his bio from how am I typing and talking at the same time, Unifield? Because I've been doing this for a long time. Praise the Lord. I'm getting as good. I'm pretty soon I'll be as good on this as I am on saxophone when that's saying something. But here's something that's interesting. So I was trying to find him on Google real quick because I wanted to throw. I was like, I don't know what school he came from. It turns out he's from, he's graduated from Cambridge, and so he's done tremendous work in DNA. Look at how Google has him listed. It has him listed. Oh, well, I've got to. It has him listed as an author, American author. Can you believe that? Now, imagine, Rod, if you were like, that's like saying, oh, Muhammad Ali, philanthropist. No, Muhammad Ali, heavyweight champion of the world, philanthropist. You know what I mean? You always put the greatest achievement, like what got everybody, what got you to the party. Tom Hanks, actor, philanthropist, blah, 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 blah. So this right here shows you this avarice that the industry, especially, and I'd like to talk. You've seen Expelled, right?
Oh yeah,
by Ben Stein.
Yeah, I love Ben Stein.
Let us know in the chat. Y'all let us know who in the chat has seen Expelled by Ben Stein, the film about intelligent design. And let's read this comment from Robert Vance. Scientists don't even know what questions to ask until God reveals the inquiry into their intellect. Science is discovering God's form of order. Well, it used to be. It used to be. Now it's getting to the point they just invent stuff. They just make stuff up and theorize and daydream and put it in a book. And I tell you, he's become a controversial figure, but Kent Hovind has done an excellent job of exposing the lies that have been in our science textbooks for nearly a century. From the embryo's development, the development of the embryo in the egg, from the evolution of the horse, which there have been museums that have taken it out because it's been proven to be completely false, to things concerning the evolution of man, Cro-Magnon man, Neanderthals, a lot of these interspecies missing link type things that they believe, it's like, oh yeah, we found a tooth and it's this version of man. Like, oh, it's been in a museum for 30 years and they tested DNA. It's like, oh, that's a pig's tooth. Pretty incredible stuff. So Kent Hovind goes into that. There's a video he has called 100 Reasons Why Evolution is Stupid. And I highly encourage you to watch it. It's excellent. It's excellent. He's very entertaining, but it's also quite informative. But
I just pulled up Stephen Hawking just for grins to see what it said about Stephen Hawking. It says English theoretical physicist and cosmologist.
Yeah,
as the subtitle. Now, if you read the article, it does say he's an author too,
yeah,
but it doesn't start off with author.
yeah. I guarantee you. Well, hold up. Let's do another one. Let's do another one. Let's do your favorite.
Richard Dawkins.
No, that's not your favorite. Come on, Rod.
Oh,
Who am
oh,
I going to
right.
pull up?
Neil
Who am I
deGrasse
going
Tyson.
to pull up? What does it say? What does it
American
say?
astrophysicist, and I can't read this.
Astrophysicist and writer. Not
Right.
writer,
Okay.
not celebrity, not TV personality.
Mm.
Astrophysicist, but you go over here to Stephen C. Meyer, and it's author, not biologist, not. I mean, that's just it's incredible. It's
And then
absolutely
if you type in intelligent design, I think it's on Wikipedia. It calls intelligent design pseudoscience.
really.
Yeah, you might want to try that.
Oh yeah, let's go to Wikipedia. Oh my gosh, Rod, you are. Oh my gosh, dude, I'm about to get mad. I'm about to get like Rocky 3 mad. No, 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 no. He's not getting killed. He's getting mad. The scientific argument. And here's the crazy thing. I see your question, Unifield. We'll get there. I'll flash it up there just so everybody can see, just to get the comments stirred up. If you watched, so I don't know if nobody's responded yet to the question of who's watched Expelled by Ben Stein. Richard Dawkins doesn't even call intelligent design that. He doesn't call it a pseudoscience. It's a theory based off evidence, as is it's the theory of evolution, right? But he even says, well, there's ways that it could come about based, on dot 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 dot. So he doesn't even list it like that.
Mm-hmm.
He just doesn't like God. He's like, basically take God out of it, and anything else I'm cool with. I'm cool with it being aliens. I'm cool with it being this, or like that one scientist in that film, light hopping off of crystals. I'm like, how in the world do you get, like you said, a 4-letter code, ACGT? And if you give me enough time, I would, go back into the recesses of my brain without the assistance of Google, because I could tell you what those are.
I couldn't.
Yeah,
I haven't even tried to
like,
memorize them. It's just CATG.
yeah, I was thinking about that. I was like, why are you doing another live stream on science when you're a musician? You need to talk about music, but this is the stuff I'm passionate about. I have a couple songs that are half written, that because there are so many believers that have been raised by the American miseducation system, the American indoctrination system, and you're exactly where you're at. And here's the crazy thing, Rod. It's way worse than when you were in school. It's
Oh
way
yeah,
worse, you know?
graduated a long time ago.
Yeah. So imagine what the school system has become in 30 years with, so you have kids that are in school, 6 to 8 hours a day, getting this pounded into their skulls. And if you're lucky, they're in church an hour a week. And they don't talk about this. They don't talk about this in youth group. Now, this is something I will give our Calvinists and Reformed brothers and sisters in Christ, brother. They talk about this. They combat this. They make sure to talk to their kids, to talk to their
Mhm.
youth. They make sure to root out these weeds, because they are weeds, and they will choke out, in 10 years, 10, 12 years of public education. That's why most kids, when they graduate school, they leave the church. They're like, well, this is a bunch of lie. I mean, like, Genesis is a lie. So if Genesis is a lie, why in the world am I going to believe that Jesus was who he was?
Mhm.
Just all a myth. They go the Joe Rogan route. So what are your
Yeah.
thoughts?
Well, there's nothing wrong with educating people like that. It's like Jesus said, "This ought you to have done, and not left the other undone."
Mm.
Where charismatics mess up is, and Pentecostal people, we tend to put the emphasis on the supernatural and say, well, miracles and signs and wonders, that will convince everybody that the Bible is true. And they don't do the apologetics work that you see in the Reform crowd. I think you need to do both. The
Yeah.
Reform crowd just ignores the supernatural aspect of power evangelism, and the charismatic crowd tends to ignore the intellectual stuff. And you need both. You need to talk about these things as well as laying hands on the sick and seeing them recover.
Yeah.
So I have nothing against the reform crowd or anybody doing apologetics that way. I think it's a great thing to prepare kids to go out into the real world and encounter a secularist worldview. They better be ready for it.
Yes. Especially as science becomes has gone into the absurd and the ridiculous now, where they are redefining words
Hmm.
and ignoring what is plain scientific fact. Genders don't exist, sex isn't a real. It's like, what in the world are you talking about? Yeah, it's bled into the culture war.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh well, a lot of the science world doesn't go along with that. Neil deGrasse Tyson has, but a lot
well,
of people.
yeah, he doesn't like to talk about it because he doesn't want to get canceled. He doesn't want to get kicked
Right.
out of the party. He likes the fame, but he knows as soon as he said, "Well, this isn't scientific," well, there goes your Tonight Show appearances, there goes your
Hmm.
movie cameos, there goes your television cameos, there goes your being on the TLC and all these science channels because TLC and what is it, TLC Discovery and what's that other channel that tried to kick off the couple from Texas. They do all like the homey design stuff that is nearly, I mean, 99% of the men on there are gay.
Arts,
I don't know
arts
what
and
you call 'em.
entertainment.
It's one of those. There's like 5 or 6 channels that are owned by the same company, and it's all
A
that
and
same.
A's, I think it's what it's called.
Yeah. So, he doesn't want to get canceled from that. But go ahead.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of the scientific world that doesn't go along with Darwinian evolution. A lot of them have signed a letter of disagreement, or I don't know what they called it, but like 500 different people in the science community have said that there are serious issues with Darwinian and neo-Darwinian uh, science, and that we need to have an honest discussion about these issues. And so when you hear that, well, 90% of the science world uh, accepts evolution, Darwinian evolution, that's because, well, a lot of them are pressured into it, for one thing, because they'll get their funding cut if they don't agree with it. And
Yeah.
then other people will say, well, I agree with natural selection, which even creationists believe in natural selection. So just agreeing with one component of evolution doesn't mean that you believe in Darwinian evolution, that, we all came from a vat of primordial ooze.
Yeah. I pulled up my sermon notes. I had this sermon that I started working on. It's 6 pages deep of references, quotes, and of course, like the message. Shortly after COVID, when seemingly, I told my wife, I was like, "Well, I don't know if my music career is, if I'm ever going to have a music career again," because I had 50 shows canceled. The deposits were returned. So I was like, "Well, I've always wanted to preach this stuff," and I've seen this severe lack in our youth, specifically, that they don't have answers to these questions.
Mm.
Um, and I wrote this sermon called like Dinosaurs, Dragons, and DNA: The Biblical View of Creation versus Evolution. And a lot of this stuff is actually from Dr. Grady McMurtry's work, Kent Hovind's work, Answers in Genesis, Kent Ham, um, and dude, like hundreds of hours of stuff that I've just been studying over the last decade because I told Ken Hovind, if not for the lies that I had to regurgitate, I would have been a scientist or a doctor. Like, I love medicine, I love biology, I love
Mm.
zoology. Like, that's my daughter asked me the other day, she asked me about some animal, and I was like, "Pop," you know, just some random thing, and it's my jam. I
Mhm.
enjoy it. But I was like, I aced science and I hated regurgitating the lies. So I said, I'm not doing this.
Well, I'm a little bit different. I was never a big fan. In high school. Chemistry and biology were my worst subjects. I hated chemistry. For some reason, it just didn't click with me. But I was real good with the abstract stuff, music and history, and English. I was always good at English.
Mm.
And it wasn't until I was older and I got into the computer world that I started to develop an appreciation for science, because really the computer field began as a result of physics, advances in physics, where we discovered uh, what's it called, where you the quantum field theory.
Yeah.
And because without quantum field theory or quantum mechanics, basically all we would have would be electrical circuits, currents to have to turn the lights on and stuff like that. But a transistor radio, computer technology, everything with electronics
Yeah.
is a result of quantum mechanics and the discoveries in quantum mechanics less than 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so you wouldn't have computers if we didn't know how to manipulate electrons.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like computers. I like the internet. I like portable devices, even communication devices. And all of that is because we have an appreciation for science.
Yeah.
So, I know a lot of Christian people say, well, that's,
It's the devil.
yeah, it's just like they
That's
used
the
to
devil,
do.
Bobby Boucher.
They used to do that with television, the
Yep.
idiot box, the boob tube. I mean, turn that devil off. And television, as we have seen, can be used to spread the gospel in a powerful way, as
Mm-hmm.
as radio is, and as now the internet is. So there's nothing wrong with using technology and having appreciation for technology. And as you and I have discussed, I have a problem with people saying the devil got into my computer, because computers are just machines.
Yeah.
If you're not going to say the devil got into my dishwasher or into my sewing machine or my lawnmower, then why would you say the devil got into your computer? It's just a machine, and it does what it's programmed to do. As
Listen,
lo-
Rod, the devil got into that handgun and that hammer, and that's why I stubbed my toe, and that's why that kid shot all those people, because the devil is he's just in everything. And
right, the devil, it's been said before: guns don't kill, people kill.
the devil,
It's the
the devil
it's
kills it.
the
He
person
kills,
with
steals, and
the gun.
destroys.
And if the computer messes up and starts creating chaos, it's because somebody hacked into it and programmed it to. But yeah, I've always, since I got into IT years and years and years ago, I've had an appreciation for science. Unfortunately, that's what kind of pulled me away from the creationist view of
Mm.
Genesis. So I had to do a little tweaking there and come back to a more biblical view. But I haven't abandoned my appreciation for science. And you were naming all those people a while ago. Here's a name that you probably should look up: is Spike Saris. P.S. I think it's P.S.A.R.R.I.S. But this guy just strictly talks about cosmology, planets, stars, galaxies.
How do you spell his last name?
I think it's P.S.A.R.R.I.S.
Okay, yep. I've never heard of him.
Oh,
Creation.com.
you got to watch some of his videos. He talks about Ganymede a lot, and Io, and all the moons of Jupiter, and all the things that don't match. 'Cause, see, evolution doesn't just mean biological evolution. There is also cosmological
Yeah, well,
evolution.
absolutely. That the planets. I mean, that's the absurdity. That I've seen Neil deGrasse try to paint his poetic tap dancing of why we have three moons and two planets that spin in the opposite direction in our own solar system.
Mhm.
But it's impossible when when you just get to the basics of science, of inertia and angular momentum. It's impossible. It's absolutely impossible, you
Yeah.
know? Um,
Yeah, Spike brings out a lot of stuff like that. That there's a lot of things that we see in our solar system, in other star systems, and other galaxies that don't fit with evolutionary cosmology or cosmological evolution.
Yeah.
The Big Bang theory. The Big Bang theory is, everything was just a tiny, dense, hot speck. And then over billions of years, the universe expanded. After 500 million years, everything cooled off enough for galaxies to form. And, it's way over my pay grade to explain how the galaxies form and everything. But basically, it all comes out of what they call nebula and then the cooling process and everything. But when you really understand all the aspects of the Big Bang model, there's a lot of things that just don't add up. And
Nope.
that's what Spike Soros covers. And he's you got to watch some of his stuff. He's great.
I put so there's a playlist there in the comments I just dropped. It's my playlist called Science and Faith, and there's a lot of these videos. Actually, man, it kind of warmed my heart and kind of broke my heart. I see our brother Chris Harrison there. He's the fifth video, What God Says About Women in Ministry. That's an excellent. I was wanting to have it on Soul Vitamins this year to talk about that. So, but anyway, one of the videos in here, it's one of the earliest videos in this playlist that's 134 videos long, is R.C. Sproul's interview. So before R.C. Sproul passed away, right after in Expelled came out, he interviewed Ben Stein, and he was blowing Ben Stein's mind because of his scientific knowledge. And he's like, how do you know this stuff? He's like, I don't know, it's basic stuff, I thought. But R.C. Sproul was talking about an interview he did with Carl Sagan of the Cosmos. He was Stephen Hawking, for those of us in our generation. I didn't really know Carl Sagan. I know Carl Sagan from people talking about Carl Sagan, but I didn't grow up with him, right? So he's interviewing him, talking about the Big Bang, and he said the Big Bang violates the second law of inertia. And when he pressed him about it, he moved on. He didn't want to answer it because what's the second law of inertia? He's like, an object at rest stays at rest until acted upon by an outside force.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the outside force that sparked this thing?
The prime mover. Aristotle called it the prime mover or the unmoved mover.
The unmoved mover.
Which is outside of the realm of space, time, matter, and energy. Something outside of the universe brought it into existence. Yes. Whether you believe it was God or some alien with a computer or whatever, there had to have been a cause, an outside force acting upon something else. Or in the case of the Christian view of God, just speaking it into existence from nothing, creatio ex nihilo.
Yes,
in the Latin.
Yes.
So it's you press these guys on some of these things, and you're going to expose some of the flaws in their logic and in their model. It's not that we have all the answers, but they don't either. But and they'll acknowledge it. If you press them, they'll say, well, of course we don't have all the answers, but we don't use the God of the gaps escape mechanism like creationists do. But a lot of times what is called God of the gaps is just reasoning based upon what we understand about the nature of the universe is, like you said, everything in motion or things that are at rest tend to stay at rest unless acted upon by another force or whatever.
Yeah.
That's that creates a philosophical problem. Sooner or later, you're going to come down to philosophy and theology.
Yes.
You may not want to, but sooner or later, you're going to have to come to that dilemma. Either you've got some natural force out there generating, which they've actually theorized this now, that there's this universe generator out there somewhere that quantum fluctuation is what they call it. Just there's this thing out there that's just generating universes, and we just happen to be in the universe where life is possible.
Yeah.
Because all of this stuff about like Star Trek, Star Wars, science fiction is based on the belief in evolution. If life evolved from the elements here on Earth, then there's got to be tens of thousands, if not millions, of similar planets out there in the universe where life also evolves to the point where people can develop technology and fly around and everything.
Yeah.
And so that's what really prompted the whole science fiction craze was evolution and the Big Bang. And if evolution isn't true, then we have no reason to believe there's life on any other planet.
Yep.
They don't want to talk about that, but they've got this thing called SETI, Search for
Mhm.
Extraterrestrial Intelligence. It's been out there for over half a century, and they got nada, nothing.
Yeah, I like Chuck Missler used to famously quote the NASA super scientist. I think he was in, I want to say he was in the Department of Defense as well. Because NASA and that stuff, they sit together. You familiar with with that name, Robert Jastrow? I'm sure you've heard this quote before.
I've heard that name, but I can't place it.
So it talks about the scientist. Oh, hold up, actually, yeah.
Was that the one about the theologians on the top of the mountain?
Yes, yes. So that's yeah. Here's the quote. I'm going to put it here so everybody can see it. Um, For the scientist who has lived his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. This guy was not a Christian, by the way. He scaled the mountains of ignorance. He is about to conquer the highest peak as he pulls himself over the final rock. He is greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries.
Yeah. Oh, hey, what took you so long?
Seriously. I
We've
mean,
been
that's
sitting
why,
here all this time. We knew.
yeah. Well, and it all comes back to a religion. You have to take this stuff by faith. There's only science has its limits. Our technology has its limits.
Mhm.
Um, and that's kind of the thing. It's like, well, we have the God of the gaps. Well, what's better, the a God of these gaps? Which to me, I'm like, where's the gap?
Hmm.
Where's the gap? You have no intermarried species. You guys are looking at creatures that are in the same levels of sediment, the same rock layers. You have this pre-horse and the horse in the same layer in the earth, saying this one came, this many millions of years before this one. There's a quote. I was trying to find it. Um, Ivano, I love it. I was just calling Unifield that's your handle. So Ivano, I'll try to remember that, and I will get to your flat earther thing because I'm sure Rod's gonna have strong opinions on that. Um, but there's this quote. There was a letter written to the head paleontologist of Britain's national, their biggest museum. Right, it has the most dinosaurs at the time. It had the most dinosaur fossils than any other museum on Earth. And he said, basically, I regret to inform you that if we had any of these missing links, that there are none. There are none.
Hmm.
So they have these things in books that they teach to children, that they teach to young adults in college, and everybody just, we have that whole thing of the evolution of man from chimpanzee all the way up to to modern man, and it's a straight myth. That's like that's even like the in those exhibits where they give those prehistoric men, they give them white eyes, unlike apes, which have completely black eyeballs.
Hmm.
That's a subtle thing that until somebody pointed it out, I was like, holy cow, I never noticed that was what gave them such a human countenance, because they had changed the eye color because, our irises are colored, but everything, but the rest of the eye is white, and in apes, it's all black.
Yeah. Interesting. But
Very.
they'll do what we sometimes refer to as science of the gaps, because they'll
Yes.
say, well, this is true and this is true. Yeah, but what about that? Well, we haven't figured that out yet, but we will.
Well, no, well, to me, their answer is millions of years, millions and billions of years,
Time and chance.
time and chance, and the age of the universe. I think Chuck and Hovind and McMurtry, I think, point this out, that by science standards, the Earth is aging something like 14,000 years an hour. I mean, it's something ridiculous because they keep on making the age of the universe older to fit their theories.
Mm.
So, it started at 700,000 years old, then it was 1 billion years old, then it was 1.2, then it was 1.3, 1.37, then it was 1.5, and they always have to add 1.53 to make it look like, oh no, we did some math, you know.
Yeah,
I
well,
mean,
a lot of that was driven by the development of telescopic technology, because the better we could see the universe, the more distant galaxies we were able to detect.
Mhm.
And the further away the galaxies, the more distance for the sunlight to travel. And so they finally arrived at the conclusion that the most remote galaxy we've ever observed is 13.3 billion light years from Earth. And then you add on a half a billion years to that for the universe to cool down enough for galaxies to form. And that's where they come up with the 13.8 billion years as the age of the universe.
Yeah.
But I think they've kind of come to the conclusion now that we've seen as much as we're going to be able to see, because the universe is expanding, and the part that we can't see is going to get going further and further away, and we'll never be able to see it.
And it's
So
behind stuff, and it's behind other galaxies. So now, it gets to a point where it's speculation because you have so much stuff in that is in your vision, you can't see what's behind it. But
yeah,
here's the crazy thing. Here's the crazy thing. In the 80s and 90s, and this is now this is settled. This is settled science, right? Settled science that they've proven by mathematically, by experimentation, this is by observation, that the speed of light is not a constant. And there's a Hebrew physicist. I can't remember his name. I have it. He's in the science and faith thing, talking about the age of the universe, because he talks about the speed of the light has slowed down. We know we've been measuring it for, I can't remember how many. It's like a couple hundred years. We've been measuring the speed of light, and it's been. So he said, if it's slowed down by this at the same rate, which we don't know. We don't know. That's why carbon dating. One of the reasons why carbon dating and radiometric dating doesn't work, because we don't know the amount of these particles that are in our atmosphere. If they've remained constant, that's a huge guess. But he said just by this rate of slowing down, he said if you wind the clock back up, he said you get about 7,000 years of creation. Like he said, you wind the clock back, and it's like, well, yeah, it's pretty close to 7,000 years, which was great, but that's, I
well,
don't get into the whole
have you ever
theory.
heard of Jason Lyle?
Maybe.
Dr. Jason Lyle, he talks about cosmology and astro. I don't think he's an astrophysicist. I think he just studies astronomy
Hey,
and
hey, hey,
cosmology.
what do you think Google? What do you think Google has him listed as? What do you think Google has him listed as? Because I didn't know he was a Christian, but apparently he's a Christian. What do you
Yeah,
think Google has him listed as?
a
Um,
myth, mythicist, or I don't have any idea, but they're not going to call him a scientist
Jason
right out of the
Lyle,
gate.
author.
Author, okay.
Author, not a physicist, not an astrophysicist. He's an author
And he
because,
pushes pseudoscience,
yes.
probably.
I mean,
But
can it be any more obvious? This prejudice.
yeah,
It's ridiculous.
from Wikipedia as well as everything. But he talks about the speed of light also. And this is way over my head, so I'm not going to try to explain it. But according to Jason Lyle, what we know about light, we can't measure the speed of light any one direction. You can only measure it round trip.
Yeah.
And so it may be going out faster than it's coming, or it may be coming faster than it's going. But because of the way that we measure it, it can only be measured round trip, not one way.
Mm-hmm.
And I may not even be saying that right, but he says there's a big question mark on how you measure the speed of light. Now there's this other guy. Oh, I should have done some notes on this. Humphreys, I think is his last name, where he talks about time dilation.
Mm-hmm.
You know what time dilation is?
Oh,
The
yes.
idea that, yeah, that the impact of gravity influences the perception of the passing of time. That's why astronauts, when they're out there in space, they don't age as fast as we do.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get way out there in the universe, halfway between our galaxy and the Andromeda galaxy, where there's no mass and there's no gravity, the perception of the passing of time is going to be completely different than
Well,
it is.
yeah, and then if you add how if you traveled there at half the speed of light, that also has tremendous mind-boggling effects. That was one of Chuck Missler's favorite things when he started teaching the Bible. If he started to teach you the Bible, he started with a physics lesson because
Mhm.
we have most believers have no concept of how this. I mean, just a basic understanding of how the order that God has put in the universe. It's incredible, you know.
Yeah, hang on a
He
second.
he uses that explanation of, if you put twins and they're astronauts and you leave one on Earth and you put one on a ship, you send them out half the speed of light for X amount of years, and then he makes the trip back, and like the brother will have aged double, and
Mhm.
then on Earth than the one that left and came back, because time he didn't experience time the same, you know.
Interstellar, they went through a wormhole and they came back to Earth, and his daughter's in an old folks' home. Uh, yeah, Russell Humphreys is the guy's name that's working it because he's a Christian. And he's working on this time dilation issue to try to figure out if the Earth and the universe are actually 7,000 years old, like the Bible says, and that time
Hmm.
dilation is responsible for the discrepancies that we see. This is why I came up with my view is that young Earth creationism and old Earth could very possibly both be true.
Yes, that's
And some people
that's
think that's a cop out, but I think until we understand the implications of time dilation, there's no way of knowing that either one or the other is true. They could conceivably both be true,
yeah.
which
Well,
means that the universe could be 7,000 years old from one perspective and 13.8 billion years old from another.
which wouldn't that just be like God?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be God to be like, I mean, because this, ever since, and I know I'm not gonna say who I got this quote from, because some people will be like, oh man, he listens to that guy, but I heard this quote from this preacher, and it just stuck with me, and it's actually funny to me that I heard it from this guy and not like my Hebrew roots mentor, or not somebody like Perry Stone. It was this other guy who said, listen, God's Jewish. And and when you think of it, wouldn't that be just like the Lord to be like, well, yeah, well, of course you're right. And of course he's right. You're both right. And you're both wrong.
Mhm.
That's just to me, like, I just can hear, I can just hear the Lord in his Southern Galilean accent, telling the disciples, you're both right and you're both wrong. You know,
Right.
it wouldn't be, that's not a stretch of the imagination, I don't think.
We don't have to study theology too long to encounter what we call tensions, theological tensions between two different concepts.
Mm,
It's like, are we justified by faith, or are we justified by works? And James says we're justified by works, and then Paul says we're justified by faith. But James says faith without works is dead. In a sense, both are true, but you can't earn your salvation. You're not going to work your way to heaven,
yeah.
but saving faith will produce good
Works.
works. And we are saved, the Bible says, unto good works. So it's tricky because you don't want to get into a works based salvation, but
Mm,
at the same time, works is important in the life of a Christian.
yes.
Holiness, sanctification, charity, Christian love, and so forth. But you always have to remember that we don't earn our salvation. We
That's
do
right.
our good works because we're saved, not in order to be saved. And then you have the tensions between one God and three persons.
Oh boy.
Figure that one out.
Modalism.
Right. And
Trinitarians, oh, it's heresy.
some people accuse Christians of being polytheistic. We have three
Uh-huh.
gods. and then some
Yeah.
people call it a three-headed God. So try and figure that one out. And then you've got other tensions like Israel and the church. There's a lot of
Oh,
verses well that applies to the church.
he is trying to hit. Rod's just dropping them all over the place.
Well, I'm just saying, if we are going to grapple with theological tensions as Christians, why can't we do that as far as philosophy is concerned? Why can't we do that as far as science is concerned? Einstein never could figure out how his view of physics could be true and quantum mechanics could be true. He rejected it at first. He said God doesn't play dice with the universe. He
Yeah.
doesn't leave things up to chance. But
Yeah.
eventually Einstein had to accept quantum mechanics because it was proven to be true. And he spent the last 30 years of his life trying to figure it out, and he never did.
Mm.
So, we have in the world of science, we have seeming contradictions. Light. Is light a wave or a particle?
Yes.
Well,
The
it
answer is yes.
depends. Yeah, the answer is yes. You've got things like that in science where they've given up trying to figure it out. String theory. How long have they been trying to figure out string theory?
Yeah.
And string theory is one way that they're trying to resolve or reconcile the Einstein view of physics and the Niels Bohr quantum mechanics view. And they thought at first, well, we got it figured out now, string theory. But the more they dug into that, the more confounding it became. So if you can have apparent contradictions in the world of science and in the world of theology, why can't you have them in the world of philosophy? Don't know. We just don't know. We can't, and we just have to accept the fact. And in our Western world, our Western thinking,
The
we
Greek
don't.
mind.
Yeah, we don't like to accept the fact that we don't know, and we're never going to know.
Yeah.
But that's where faith comes in.
Yeah, I
I-
think that's why we need to lock arms with our brothers in the Orthodox Church, and even to a small extent, well, I think this is it's funny. I have not studied enough to understand to the fullest extent of what the issues were back in the day and now with the Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church, but seems to be from people that I've seen defect and go into the Eastern Orthodox Church and people that call them out is it's like, well, it's the mysticism, and I'm like, well, that might be, you could say that that's the issue between the cessationist and the continuationist, is it's that I cannot take my hand and grab and get a firm grip on water. I can't. It's going to slip through my fingers every time. My hands are going to get wet,
mm-hmm.
but I'm never going to fully understand nor grasp it because it's a human mind. His ways are higher than our ways. And in that Eastern mentality, and this is something Ravi Zacharias talked about all the time, was it's not this either or, it's the both and.
Yeah.
And that's how I've really tried in the last, oh goodness, maybe decade of my faith to try to, even looking at, I mean, even I'm so grateful for the year I spent with the Presbyterian Church, because I'm like, man, I look at believers that I've been in the faith with, that I've ministered with, that have seen signs and wonders and miracles, and they've seen incredible things that the Lord has done. I mean, things that science nor human can explain, and they've walked away from the faith.
Mm.
They've gone into liberal theology until the point now they're spiritualist, or they just, they don't even believe the word. And I'm like, how does
Mm-hmm.
that even work? How is that? And then I look at my Calvinist friends, and I'm like, you might have a point. You just might have a point, because how can anybody looking at a bowl of spaghetti and they can smell it and they can taste it and say there's no bowl of spaghetti? It's
Mm-hmm.
just it blows my mind.
Well, because we've pushed the intellectual aspect of Christianity so much, when it's no longer intellectually satisfying, people just, all right, we'll chunk it. We'll find something else that works,
Go
because
on to the next thing.
And yeah, and this is where a lot of wokeism comes from. This is where a lot of progressive Christianity comes from, is people see things in the Bible that just don't make sense to them.
Mm.
They can't process it, like slavery. Okay. It's a good example. Well, the Bible condones slavery. Well, no, it doesn't actually condone slavery, but it did allow for indentured servitude.
Yep.
But chattel slavery, slave trading, was forbidden. It was a capital offense. But there's no question that you could buy a person in the Bible. And a lot of people say, "Well, I just can't accept that." Well, they did not have orphanages. They didn't have insurance companies. And they had a patriarchal society. So how are people going to provide for themselves? If a woman's husband dies, she has no means of providing for herself. Her options were manual labor, or to be a beggar, or to offer her services to somebody in
Yeah.
exchange for food, clothing, and shelter. That was their system. It was their way of providing for the less fortunate. Orphans, when the Bible talks about taking care of orphans, you can't
Orphans
think
and
of that
widows.
in terms of 21st century America. You had to think in
No.
terms of a kid without anybody feeding him,
Yes.
out there on the street. They didn't have orphanages, you
Hmm.
know. So when it talks about visiting orphans, it's not talking about in an orphanage.
Yeah.
And we have those mechanisms today. We have ways of taking care. I mean, if a woman has a $10 million insurance policy on her husband and he gets killed and she collects $10 million, she's set.
Yep.
And there was no such thing thousands of years ago in their society. So you're going to take those things into consideration. And then there's the issue of genocide. God sent Israel in to destroy the Canaanites. Okay. People say, well, if God is telling them to commit genocide, I can't serve a God like that. Well, again, you got to take into consideration what the ancient world was like,
Hmm.
because in many cases it was kill or be killed.
Hmm.
And then you have the whole aspect of the corruption of the bloodline that
Nephilim.
you could probably talk about that a little bit.
Oh
And it
yeah. Oh, well, that's going to be a whole episode. That's going to be a whole episode where we talk about the Nephilim, and that's honestly what brought my brother Jonathan Goss back into the fold.
really,
He could not ratify that, and he was at a progressive church that was getting super woke, and it was rubbing him the wrong way, but he
hmm
could not, ratify logically that issue until he started to learn about the Nephilim. So he was backslidden, or not even backslidden, just like had walked away from it for
right.
years. But there's an answer. This is another thing to quote Chuck Misser. Anytime we find what is it? The people. It's not disagreements, not arguments. What is it in the Bible? Contradictions. He said, when
hmm
you find a contradiction, there's a revelation waiting for you.
Mm, that's
But this
good.
is why we have to study to show ourselves approved, because when the non-believer comes, now some people come looking for an argument, and
Right.
Jesus knew. This is why you ask them, listen, you don't care about the answer. What's the heart of what you're getting at? And you see that all the time when he answered the Pharisees and the Sadducees. If they came to him looking for a fight, he answered them and shut them down. If they came trying to learn something, like I think it was Robert Vance did earlier, he put Nicodemus in there. Yeah, Robert Vance did. He gave Nicodemus the truth. He's like, I'm going to give you a revelation. So I believe we need to be in the Spirit, in the Word, study to show ourselves approved, to give these answers. You know, well, why do you believe in a young Earth? Well, it possibly could be for these scientific reasons, these biblical reasons. Well, why do you believe in old Earth? Well, for these biblical reasons, and that I could actually make a strong case for both, which is why I'm like you. I stand very much comfortably in the middle, because it doesn't. Number one, it's not a salvific issue, but
hmm
there's evidence for both, and they're very interesting.
hmm
They're very interesting. They lead you to questions. They lead you to seek, and to seek more in the Word of God. I love it. To me, it
And
doesn't frustrate me.
in the evangelical world, we we abhor mystery.
Mm,
The Catholics and the Eastern Orthodox embrace it,
yes.
but we can't stand it. We got to figure this out, you know. Well, and then eventually, with some issues like the hypostatic union and the Trinity and everything. Okay, well, we may never totally comprehend it, but we apprehend it. That's the way that apologists say it.
Yeah.
But I think we have to have more of an appetite for mystery in the evangelical world, to where if we don't understand something, oh, fine, I'll just put that on the shelf. I'm going to just focus on what I do understand. You remember the apostles after Jesus was resurrected, they said, "Are you going to restore the kingdom to Israel?" You know, they're
That's not
wanting to
for you
know
to know.
how this is all going to play out, and Jesus said, "That's not for you to know."
Yeah.
Okay, it's none of your business. And then they said, "Well, what about John?" And he said, "It's none of your business." Okay, you just do what I tell you to do. You just
Yeah.
do you, and accept the fact that you're not going to have all the answers. Jesus started talking about how unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no part of me. A lot of the people left at that point, but some of them said, "You alone have the words of eternal life." But they didn't understand what he was saying either
Yeah.
until the Last Supper, and they partook of communion. Then they got the significance of the bread and the wine. But this, sometimes if you're going to follow the Lord, you're just going to have to accept mystery.
Trust.
You're going to have to accept the fact that you're not going to have all the answers, and
Well,
it's not just an intellectual thing.
yes. Here's the beautiful thing. So, as you were talking about this seeming contradiction between faith and works, well, look at Yeshua. Look at the Messiah. Look at whom we are to be modeled after.
Hmm.
He believed and he did good works, but even he has a mystery because he doesn't know the data. He said only the Father knows.
Hmm.
So even he has to just trust and have faith that the Father will tell him, okay, it's go time.
Right.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. You know?
No, then there's a whole subject. Well, yeah, but that was before he got his glorified body. Maybe now he does know. I don't know. You get into the whole thing
Well,
about
yeah, because now he's reigning over the earth right now. So there is, we're in the kingdom right now, which once again to Chuck the Great, to quote the great Chuck Missler, if the Lord is reigning and Satan is bound in chains, his chains are too long.
Mhm. Well, that's
But
another one of those, where you've got, it's not an either or, but it's a both and it's also uh, now and how do they put that? Uh, the now and the not yet, the
mm,
already and the not yet. That's what it is.
yeah,
The already and the not yet. We live in the kingdom of God, but it's not fully manifested. But
yep, yep,
it's here with us now in reality, but
yes,
it's not physically manifested.
because he's not sitting on the throne in Jerusalem.
Right.
But we are here to occupy, which when you look and we should all anybody that pays attention to occupy should know what that word means.
Hmm. Yeah,
That's our job.
I'd like to get back, though, to the main question we started with, um, because I'm going to have to go here in a little bit, or get up and walk around or something. I mean, you could answer the flat Earth question. I get up and walk around while you're
There
doing
you go.
that. But the issue of, is our science and Christianity compatible? Science really, I mean, what we understand as science today with the scientific method, it actually began with people of faith.
Yes.
And it wasn't called science, it was called natural philosophy. And,
Really?
yeah.
I didn't know that.
And originally it was called natural philosophy. Google it. And natural philosophy, and it was considered something that Christian people did. You ask questions about God's creation, you study God's creation. And Sir Isaac Newton was a man of faith, and he looked at the cosmos as a way of understanding and thinking the thoughts of God. Nah. Yeah,
There it is right there.
right. So eventually, in the 19th, late 18th, early 19th century, science became naturalistic, which means there's no supernatural. Everything is just natural. And or another way of saying it is materialistic. There is
Yeah.
no spirit, there's only matter. and all of a sudden it was illegal to invoke God in any way when you're studying science, even though Sir Isaac Newton wrote a ton of stuff about God and theology,
Mm.
and as Pascal and Kepler, all those guys did. So they not only are the Christian faith and science compatible, they started off together.
Yeah.
And the division came because of secularization of the Western world during the Enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had evolution and what they call the geologic column. You should talk to Marcus about the geologic column.
Oh, it's a farce.
He can go on and on and on about that.
Oh yeah, man, I can't. He needs to retire, man, because we need him on these conversations. No,
Yeah.
that one ticks me off. That one really ticks me off quickly.
Mhm. Yeah. So yes, they are compatible when you understand the history of science. That it actually started off as natural philosophy, and it was encouraged by the church until they violated some of the church's views, like
Yeah, like geocentrism, helios.
Galileo and Copernicus. They
Yeah,
started off with the view of
blessing.
Ptolemy,
Yeah, yeah.
who
That
he had
silent
a
P. That
the
silent
silent
P.
prides. Ptolemy had the geocentric view that the universe, the Earth is the center of the universe, and everything revolves around the Earth. And then Copernicus and Galileo said, "I don't think that's how it works," and they promoted the heliocentric view, and they got all kinds of grief from the church. This is one area where science has helped the world of theology to see where they were off.
Mm-hmm.
Because we interpreted the Genesis account of creation a certain way that made the earth, and the Bible never says the earth is the center of the universe. There were things that were interpreted that way, maybe metaphorically or whatever.
Yeah.
And then that's where we get into the whole flat earth thing. And then, I'll let you talk about that for
Yeah.
a
Go ahead
minute
and
while I get up
stretch.
and walk around.
Yeah, go ahead and stretch, and I'll bring you back when I get to the Chris Tomlin, Joyce Meyer that Ivano just asked. So Ivano, all right. Let's see if I have some scary music. There we go. That's about as court is now in session. Doom doom bum 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 bum. Now it's time for conspiracy. No, wait, Nick Goss, my man. Oh, Nick. Nick, do you want to jump on real quick and join me on the flat Earth thing? I will send you a link because Nick Goss of the Goslings. For those of you who don't know who Nick Goss is, he has a podcast that's kind of in timeout right now called The Goslings, and they actually interviewed a full-on flat earther. And it's funny. I don't think I finished that interview. I think I was watching it, started I got 10, 15 minutes in, got a phone call or something and got distracted, never went back to it to finish it. But I'll admit I about got sucked into that at some point. I went in there and was no, they're not gone. They're just kind of on a timeout. I didn't watch your final episode, Nick, because even if you said you're done, uh, he said, "No, sir, I don't want to be associated with flat Earth ideology." Yeah, so I think what's caused this to come about is our society has been lied to so much from the scientific, from the political. I mean, our going from Rod's generation, who lived in I can't remember. He went to school with someone that was related to Oswald. Is that right, Rod? You got your ears on?
Yeah, I believe it or not, yeah, I grew up with the niece of Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah. So, I mean, you have all these lies that are thrown at us that we know are lies, and it has left people to start to question everything.
Mhm.
Um, and questioning as a rule is not bad, but it's gotten to some pretty absurd lengths. And while there are some questions that the flat Earth theory people some of them are quite interesting and legit. There are some things that you look at, and even scientifically, that they can demonstrate. You're like, well, why does that work? That shouldn't work if this Earth is a globe. Um, like you can see the city of Chicago, I think, from the other side of one of the Great Lakes, and it should be behind the curve. And they try to make this thing like, well, there's a mirage and things bounce off of the mist and blah blah blah. And it's like, it's really, the explanation does not is insufficient. It's is really insufficient. So there was Rob Skiba was big into that, and that's kind of what one of the reasons why I got sucked into it, because I liked listening to some of Rob Skiba's teaching on stuff involving the Book of Giants, the Nephilim, all that stuff. But you know, that's why I like Chuck Missler better, because he always brought it back to the Word. He always brought it back to the gospel. Most importantly, he wouldn't do a 2-hour talk just on this without bringing it back to the Bible. So yeah, that's kind of my view. Dip your toenail in. I don't think you should just tell anybody, hey, you're an idiot. Unless it's this even this trans stuff. But even then, they have some interesting things concerning people with Klinefelters and stuff, with the people that are born hermaphrodites that have both genitalia. And like, well, what do you do with that? Well, that's obviously not normal. If somebody's born without an arm, you call that normal? So yeah,
Right. As Matt Walsh put it, yes, there are hermaphrodites and there are people, that are genetically abnormal, but we also have people that are missing an arm or a leg. But we don't view people as having a spectrum of appendages. You know, there are not 50 different versions of arms and legs. We all are
yes.
supposed to have 2 arms and 2 legs.
2 arms,
And if
2 legs, 10 fingers, 10 toes, unless you're Nephilim, in which case you got
yeah,
you got six
or
fingers. The
or the
6 fingers.
Princess Bride, the guy that had 6
Hello.
fingers.
Yeah, we talked about that last night.
Inconceivable!
You
So
remember
yeah,
the 6-fingered man.
yes. That
And
and interesting enough for those of you who have not studied the Nephilim. This is Wild Bill Cody, while talking to, I think it was the Cheyenne tribes back in the late 1800s. The reason that they did this when they met you, which now triggered my camera. Yes, my camera's it's woke. It got triggered. Had nothing to do with them saying how white man. It was to see how many fingers you had, and if you know. And this is historical. We have evidence. They dealt with giants. They had a fear of the red-haired giants, the cannibals. They burnt them. There was the giants of the Lovelock Caves. They burnt them. They had the skulls. They showed them on Ancient Aliens on the History Channel, and that episode has since disappeared from syndication. So I know I'm going all over the place right here, but you say flat Earth, and it just gets me into my thing. And somebody
well,
else said something about the devil's. Go ahead. What you're gonna say? Oh, here it was.
speaking of lies, it's a lie that Christian people used to believe that the earth was
Earth was
flat.
flat. Yeah.
Right. That's a lie. That was in the Middle Ages, the days of Columbus. They did not believe that the earth was flat. They just didn't understand about the Western Hemisphere. They thought you could go west in the Atlantic Ocean and hit India and hit Asia. Well, you can, but you got to go through the Panama
Yeah.
Canal.
If there was no North American continent, then you would have, like Pac-Man, ended up on the other side.
Right, because they didn't have satellites to map everything out, and their map
If
was
they just asked the
lacking.
Vikings, if they just would have asked the Vikings could have told, no. You got to take a left turn at Albuquerque. If you go straight,
Yeah.
you're gonna hit North America. So yeah,
But actually, that whole myth that Christians believe that the earth is flat, that was started by secularists in the 19th century, 18th and 19th, back in the age of the Enlightenment. It was created to discredit people who believe the Bible by saying that they believe something that they didn't believe. We've always understood through in the history of the church. Now, maybe in ancient times, people didn't have an understanding like we do of the cosmos. Well, the church has always understood since the days of the pre-Socratic Greeks that heavenly bodies are round-ish. They're not exactly round, but They're you don't look up into the sky and see anything that's flat.
Yeah.
And so when we see the moon is round, the sun is round, and then whatever planets that we could look at when we developed telescopes
Scopes.
in the Middle Ages, everything was round, and so we
Yeah.
knew that the Earth was round. So that was just done, and you can Google that the flat Earth hoax.
Yeah.
It was done to discredit people who believe the Bible, saying that they believe the Earth is flat. We got more people that believe the Earth is flat today than ever in history
Very possible.
because of the internet. Because people see stuff on the internet and they think, "Wow, how do you explain this?" Oh, you knucklehead, just do a little research, read a little
Well,
bit.
but the problem is they don't trust the source. And like to Nick's point, I wanna get to this thing about from Matt Williams about the Devil's Tower being an old tree stump. But I want to connect this to what you're saying first. This is why, Rod, for people, they don't question, I don't question the government, the medical industry, the media institutions, or the education systems. You know, I mean, that's why, or like this one, the moon landing. How did they get to the moon? How did they get this is my issue with the moon landing. I'm not saying they didn't make it. I'm not saying it didn't happen. However, I'm skeptical because of the Van Allen radiation belts. And
You know,
don't send me a video from Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about, well, the Van Allen radiation belts, it's like a ring around us. They went over it. I'm like, then why can't they do that today? If that's an issue today, why was it not an issue 60 years ago when they did it in tin cans? And they lost the telemetry. How do you lose one of the most historic pieces of information? I mean, this is like Spear of Destiny level type stuff.
well, there is
And
no question that the Van Allen radiation belt is a problem because
thank
they
you.
understood that if they didn't solve that problem, these astronauts were going to get cooked. They were
Yeah.
not going to make it to the moon if they didn't solve that problem. And one of the ways that they solved the problem is develop rocket technology to the point where they could get through the Van Allen radiation belt up to almost 20,000 miles an hour or something. They had to be able to go real fast. They didn't have to do that to get to the moon. I mean, to arrive there, they had to do it to survive the Van Allen radiation belt. That's where we developed the speed with our rockets that we developed, is because of that. And they also had to figure out how to go through the weakest point of the Van Allen radiation belt, which is the poles. The polar
Mhm.
regions have the weakest radiation. So they had to fly around the Earth a few times and then hit the right spot and really accelerate so that they could get through the Van Allen radiation belt. I went through that too. I said, all right, how did they do this? And I researched it a little bit and I said, okay, I questioned the moon landing for a while. And one of the reasons I questioned it is because I was around before we landed on the moon. And I remember some of the concerns that they had was moon dust. Well, for one thing, they didn't know how much dust was on the moon. And they said, well, what if we land on the moon and it's like quicksand?
Yeah.
And so they had to send unmanned
Which is
vessels up there.
which is another, and this actually leads us to another proof or another piece of evidence towards a young Earth and a young universe, because if it was as old as they said it was, they should have sank,
They should have had 30, 40 feet of moon dust.
and they didn't. It was inches consistent with about 5,000-6,000 years.
I don't want to get into all that, but because we'll be going around and around on that. But yeah,
Yeah.
that was a concern. I remember we had this thing called the Weekly Reader when I was a kid. Maybe when you were a kid too, I don't know. But back in the 60s,
Mhm.
we had the Weekly Reader, and I read this is like 67, 68, a year or two before Apollo 11. And I remember reading in my Weekly Reader, scientists are wondering, about the moon dust.
Yeah.
And eventually, I think they sent an unmanned vessel up there to be able to take readings on it, because you don't want to guess. You don't want to
Yeah.
put a man on the moon without knowing.
Well, yeah, they sink and die.
Right.
They sink into 50 feet of moon dust, and it clogs up their thrusters, and then they're dead. So
What convinced me that the moon landing was real And if you guys think I was dumb because I didn't always 100%, I'm not. I never rejected it completely, but I did start to wonder because of some of these issues.
Hmm.
And it was the Cold War. There was a lot of propaganda back then because we had to convince the world that our system was superior to the Soviets. That's why we had videotape of everything, and we taught our astronauts how to use cameras because
Oh, save it.
there was a
But they
lot of emphasis on documenting everything to prove to the world that our system was better. We had to win the moon race, the space race. We had to dominate the Soviets. We don't have that mentality today, but 60 years ago, that was a big thing. The future of civilization was at stake if
yeah,
the Soviets got there first. That was the way they looked at it. And so, would they have cut a few corners and fibbed a little bit in order to win the propaganda war? I think probably they would have. They had a lot of issues with the lunar lander taking off. It wasn't
mhm,
working right. And this was shortly before the first moon mission, Apollo 11. They were still having problems with it up to a couple of months before the mission. And so, how did they solve all those problems? Did they just fake it, or did they actually solve the problems? That's the kind of stuff I was wondering. But what convinced me that we went was that we put reflectors on the moon, and you can actually shine a laser up at the moon if you know how to do it. And
mhm,
universities all around the world can do this, and shine a laser up there, hit the reflector, and measure how far away the moon is. They
yeah.
did that because they wanted to keep track of the lunar orbit. It's moving away from the moon, is moving away from the Earth a few inches a
2
year.
inches a year,
Yeah.
which again is proof for or another that's another one in the column of a young Earth because
Right. Because if you do the math, the moon should have hit the Earth a long time ago.
well, not only hit the Earth, if you give this theory of evolution, well, millions of the dinosaurs were on the Earth millions of years ago. It's like, dude, the moon was on top of the Earth millions of years ago, and the tides were so strong there'd be nothing on the Earth. Nothing could
Mhm.
survive on the Earth. So, once again, these are these contradictions that if you don't read, if you don't ask questions, you don't know. And I want to get to Matt Williams' question about the Devil's Tower being a possible tree stump. I've heard that theory, man, and I've seen those things. There's a lot of those all over the earth. I tell you, the pre-flood Earth was magnificent. We know that from the fossils of the dinosaurs we find. We know that from the fossils of the other animals we find. We find that from the fossils of the human beings we find. The average size of a human being in the pre-flood was 7 foot. They were huge, just like everything else. Like you find dragonflies that were huge, and these were non-Nephilim giants. These were like 100% human. Like the Neanderthals were actually exceptionally large. They were bigger than us. They had bigger brain capacity for and they've now classified them as Homo sapiens sapien. They're actually more human than we are because we've been copied so many times. Their genetic code is stronger because it hadn't been copied so many times. I love this. I'm telling you, I love this stuff. So, Matt Williams, I don't know, but I think it's an interesting possible observation because there are some huge trees out there. And if in the pre flood world you had dinosaurs that were growing to the size of 75, 100, 150 feet, I think the largest specimen we've ever found of a sauropod is 150 feet long. That's incredible. Shaq survived the flood confirmed. That's a good one. Some people call it Stump Tower. That's good. Yeah, Matt Williams, like they did in the Big Bang Theory. Yeah, and and honestly, it's because of the propaganda that makes me question it more. Because I'm like, well, they could send something unmanned to put those reflectors up there, but yeah, there's like I said, I don't discredit it 100%, but I also don't buy it 100% because they like to lie. They like to lie, and
Well, it would be great if we went back and just put an end to the speculation once and for all.
well,
But
yeah, if go back with with live stream, but then again, these days people would be like, "Oh, it's all done with green screen. It's Hollywood," as they do now. Like, well,
well,
that's the
that's
funny
true.
thing. Well, here's the funny thing: they've had astronauts supposedly that are up in a space station, and they don't know that they're live, and we've seen the green screen. So it makes people they've seen. I mean, there's a lot of tomfoolery. A lot of our images, supposed images, are all computer generated or computer enhanced. So there's lots of issues with that. There was yeah, Nick. The internet is a wonderful, horrible, stupid place. I love it and hate it at the same time. I feel you. Um, and we got to Matt Williams' thing about that. I think that was all the questions.
Shaq comes by his size naturally, by the way.
Yeah, he's not a Nephilim.
His mother was 6 feet tall, and his biological dad was extremely
Six
tall.
five, six. Yeah, they were both tall. So
Yeah, because there's a lot of guys in the NBA that are, like George Mirasan. I don't know if you remember George
Oh
Mirasan
yeah,
or not, but that guy you could tell by looking at him, he wasn't really normal. He was 7'6", but he
he had
couldn't run.
gigantism. He had
What's that?
gigantism. He had gigantism.
Okay, yeah, he couldn't run like Shaq. He
No.
couldn't run like a regular athlete. That's what made Shaq so phenomenal,
Yep.
was that he was that big, but he was also athletic. Man, he was diving for balls. He could do layups and pass. I remember one time he
But he
stopped.
couldn't shoot free throws.
Oh, he couldn't hit free throws because the ball was so tiny in his hand. It didn't fit like it fits in a normal person's. Wilt Chamberlain was the same way.
Yeah.
But I remember seeing Shaq one time, and this is totally off the topic, but Shaq stole the ball from Scottie Pippen one time and drove and dunked on him. And this Scottie Pippen was one of the best ball handlers in the league. But a guy like Shaq who could do stuff like that, that's what made him the legend that he was. But so many of those 7-footers are just clumsy, and they don't have natural athletic ability. That's why when you find a guy like Kareem, David Robinson, Shaq, Wilt Chamberlain, that is athletic as well, they are high value players.
Yeah.
But it hurts sometimes when you see guys like Manute Bol. Remember Manute Bol?
Oh, yeah, that was sad. Unlike Dikembe Mutombo, he was
Yeah,
one of my
Mutombo could play, but
Manute was just tall.
Manute, yeah,
He was just arms and legs,
he
man.
was about 7'5", but he
He was
probably weighed about
7'7". He was
7'7", and he weighed about 230 pounds.
Yep, he looked like he weighed 95 pounds. He was like a gigantic daddy long legs. But yeah, Flame said Rod's a sports fan. Yeah, he's actually a bigger baseball fan than he is basketball and football. Right? Baseball is like your main deal, right?
Well, I was when I was a kid. I was a
There you
big
go.
Willie Mays was my hero, but I'm probably more interested in basketball now than baseball. But I watch all of them during the playoffs. I don't watch much through the regular season.
Yep.
But yeah, I watched a lot of baseball. Well, we didn't have, when I was a kid, you didn't have baseball on TV in the week. It was only on weekends.
Mhm.
So, you had to wait and hope that your team would come at, the
Now they
game of
got
the
sports
week.
ball every day on demand on your IV.
I know I sound old, don't I? We didn't have football, but we didn't. When I was a kid, we didn't have cable television and internet. I seriously had to, because I grew up in Texas, and my favorite team was the San Francisco Giants, and they played on the West Coast. And a lot of times you didn't know the score because when the evening news gave the sports report, they're still playing on the West Coast. So I have to try to find the game on my transistor radio to see if the Giants won.
That's what made you sound old right there. I'm gonna bring it back to the topic. We're gonna do 2 more questions and we're gonna wrap up. We got an hour and a half, and so everybody, before you leave, remember to come back here Thursday night. Come back here Thursday night for our special session with Dr. Grady McMurtry. So you do not want to miss this. This dude has been living, eating, and breathing this stuff, and he's going to give us all a science and Bible lesson. But Matt Matt Williams had an interesting question. I did want to hit Ivano's question that's off topic. So let's go to the one that's on topic, then go end it with the one that's off topic. So have y'all heard about the molten sand at the Red Sea crossing? Saw it the other day on TikTok. Yes, and Kent Hovind, what's his name? Ron Wyatt? Is it Ron Wyatt? The guy that found Noah's Ark and supposedly found the Ark of the Covenant. I want to say it's Ron White. He's actually, there's a video of his that's in my Science and Faith. Yeah, it is Ron White. Yeah. Yeah, this is one of those things once again, especially for I sympathize with the Christian conspiracy theorist, mostly because I am one. But I sympathize with the ones that are the extremists, the ones that are extreme flat Earth. They're hard in the paint on a lot of this stuff because there are these discoveries that are hidden from the masses, like the mountain in I can't remember where it is in Saudi Arabia. That's where they've found the skeletons and chariots and bones of horses. In that there's a special pass that is there's a land bridge under the Red Sea that's 900 feet deep. So everywhere else on either side of it, it's 15,000 feet deep. It would be impossible for an entire, million people to cross, to go down 15,000 feet and go up. But there's a land bridge, 900, it's sloped. I mean, it's perfect for them to walk over. And in that land bridge is where they've found these skeletons. And I think that's, if that's what you're talking about, Matt, the question disappeared. Where did it go? Oh yeah, here it was. I believe that's where they found the molten sand. And when you follow that straight, it'll take you to Saudi Arabia, where they have I think it's in Arabic, it's called like the Mountain of God, and it's burnt at the top to this day. And there's ancient Hebrew petroglyphs and hieroglyphs from the Proto-Hebrew language, not the modern Hebrew, the pre-ancient Hebrew language, all over the place. There's the split rock. There's a rock that's split where, Moses struck it, when God told him to strike it, and he struck it and the water came out. So there's all sorts of things that line up with things that we read in Exodus at that site. And that's why I sympathize with the Christian conspiracy theorists, because there are discoveries like this that prove the Bible is true that are not shown to people because it proves the Bible is true, which upsets it gets people asking too many questions. Yes, meaning they were led by the pillar of fire, and the pillar fused the sand on the beach 100%. So did we talk about lifespans? We did not talk about lifespans. That's more of a pre-flood, post-flood thing, but maybe we can talk about that with Dr. Grady McMurtry on Thursday.
Yeah.
I know Kent Hovind is huge on that, because I tell you, there's crazy things that they've. So this is scientifically proven. They've taken the oxygen levels from air trapped in amber and trapped in other different things that have been fossilized, where they have air from, what they say is millions of years ago. We believe to be thousands of years ago. And the oxygen levels are near double. They're 50%, 75%, some 100% more oxygen, which and also more carbon dioxide. So when you increase the levels of oxygen and carbon dioxide, they've done this in Japan. They've done this in Japan. They've done a bunch of different experiments. There was a mall, I can't remember if it was in Japan or if it was in the United States, where they had a special greenhouse pumping in extra carbon dioxide to this tomato plant. It grew to be like 50 feet tall, grew tomatoes the size of softballs. I mean, this is documented. You can go Google it right now. And Ken Hovind talks about all that stuff. So he talks about the pre-flood Earth and the atmosphere and the conditions, and we know those conditions have to be different. And even scientists, even a secular atheistic scientist, would agree with you that the atmosphere was different, because a Diplodocus or a Brachiosaurus, so a 50-foot Brachiosaurus, had the same nostril size as a horse. It would pass out and die, because there's not enough air pressure in our current atmosphere to force the air, to get the air into its lungs for it to breathe. So the conditions had to be different. There had to be more oxygen, and there had to be more air pressure. And you get into that stuff. Ken Hovind's got a bunch of stuff on that, and it's amazing. It's awesome.
Let me just answer Nick Goss here.
Which one?
Real quick. If our nearest star is 4 million light years away, doesn't that mean it was created at least 4 million years ago if we are seeing its light? Well, first of all, the nearest star is 4 light years, not 4 million light years. Now, there are stars out there that are millions or even billions of light years away, according to the way that we measure it. But you're talking about Centauri Alpha and Proxima Centauri. It's 4.3 light years from Earth. That means if you could go at the speed of light, it can take you 4.3 years to get there, and then 4.3 to get back, theoretically, not counting for acceleration and deceleration. But that is an issue. That's what I was referring to earlier about the distant starlight problem and figuring out the effects of gravity on the perception of time, and is the speed of light consistent and everything. I don't know if you missed that earlier, but we did discuss that earlier. And they're
Yeah.
working on the time dilation issue.
Yeah, that's Chuck Missler, Grady McMurtry, Ken Hovind, a lot of the I mean, not, and even secular scientists like that, or even that guy, the Jewish scientist that I can't remember what his name was. They talk about the speed of light being it's not a constant. It's actually slowed down considerably, measurably in the last since we've been able to measure it, and we don't know if it's been slowing down at the same rate. So it could have been much faster, but he's the head physiologist of like some prestigious university in Israel that he actually came up with about a 7,000-year-old universe with his
Model.
not model, his not model, it's his mathematic
Equation?
equation. Yeah, I think it's his equation of ramping the speed of light up, following a logical. If you follow the rate at which it's been decreasing, he just reversed it with his equation, and it's pretty incredible. So yeah, Chuck Missler, I can't believe that with all the Chuck Missler you watched, you missed that. He was always talking about, because Chuck Missler knew one of the Australian scientists that made that discovery, and they laughed him out of. I mean, like he couldn't get a paper published.
They left him to scorn.
He proved it. He demonstrated it with experiments, and they still would not listen to him. It took him like 10 years of getting money and legal, I mean, all sorts of stuff before they finally. And Chuck Missler knew him because hey, he was on board for that. He's like, well, that actually makes sense, because if the Bible's true, and we've only been on this planet for 6,000 some odd years, and that's the thing, and that's another reason with the old Earth I don't get caught up with it, because I'm like, well. You've got the whole tovu bohu, the what do they call that? The gap theory, which is God created the earth and the angels came down and they had their own civilization.
Without form and void.
Yes. In the Hebrew, it says it became without form. It became without. So it was orderly and became with disorder. And it's like, well, how would that happen? I don't know. It's a lot of speculation, a lot of going to extra biblical texts. But, does it matter on our salvation? Not totally. But I mean, honestly, I believe like the things that we've been talking about, why Christians should have these answers and should seek these things out, and stuff like the Nephilim, they give answers to a lot of these problems that a lot of people have with the Word of God. So, okay. And then the last question, we're going to go to the one that unified that Ivano asked. So I'm going to let you tackle this one, Rod.
What is your view on Chris Tomlin being attacked by discernment hacks for singing at Joyce Meyer's conference in 2022? Well, I didn't know anything about that.
Me neither.
But yeah, that's a lot of people follow the 6 degrees of separation approach to apologetics. Well, you were on stage with this person.
Broke up a little bit. Say that one more time.
The 6 degrees of separation approach to apologetics. You were on the platform with this guy, and this guy wrote a book with this person, and that person, was friends with a heretic. And so anybody who's had any association with somebody who had an association, you got to condemn. You end up condemning everybody, because at some point, even John MacArthur has shared a stage with somebody who's iffy, and it's a juvenile approach to apologetics. Joyce Meyer affirms all of the essentials of the faith. Now, she said some things that were kind of dumb 25 years ago, back in back in the 20th century. Uh, I mean, yeah, it was 25 years ago when she said some of these things that she doesn't teach anymore. But even those things that she taught that she regretted and she doesn't teach anymore, they didn't violate essential Christian doctrine. They were just dumb things to say. And everybody who's been in ministry for any period of time has said something dumb at one point. John MacArthur said you could take the mark of the beast and still be saved. You know,
He
so
said that the last verses of Mark were legitimate and then walked it back 20 years later. So,
right. So you're going to have that with anybody. This is why I say we need to major on majors and not major on minors. The essentials are the deity of Jesus, the resurrection, justification by faith. These other tangential issues we don't need to worry about. And I don't know about Chris Tomlin. I don't know anything about the guy, but sharing a stage with Joyce Meyer does not make you evil, a false teacher, false prophet, heretic, wolf in sheep's clothing, et cetera, et cetera.
yep. It just means that he plays 4 chords and Jesus deserves more than 4 chords. So, and with that, we'll
That
go.
is such a good segue.
Yes, it was perfect. You see, I mean, I just like I'm getting better. I'm of talking about my music. So we're gonna end it with the commercial for y'all. Make sure you come back here Thursday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our interview with Dr. Grady McMurtry. And while you're waiting, go on YouTube and check out Rod Saunders' YouTube channel. It is Jew and Greek at Jew and Greek. I'm gonna put it right there in the comments at Jew and Greek. He's got all sorts of stuff. He has some interesting things on science. He has some interesting things on, his main thing is apologetics. So, especially if you come from a charismatic Pentecostal background, but even if you don't, and you actually curious about some of this stuff, and you're tired of people just saying all these people that believe this are going to hell. Come over here and listen to Rod's channel because he's not going to tell you're going to hell. He's just going to say, hey, look, this is what the Bible says. This is the real history of what Kenneth Hagin didn't come out of this camp. And so make sure you check out Joan Greek. And if you need some good music, come over and find me on anywhere you want to listen to music at. Apple Music, Amazon Music. If you use Spotify, then use Spotify. If you don't. It's horrible for musicians. But if you don't have any of those things, you can come here right on YouTube and go to Gabriel Bella Music and just listen to it for free. You can just listen to my music for free. All my albums are here on YouTube. So, and you can get this t-shirt, Jesus Deserves More Than 4 Chords, which is my latest single, and you should check that out. So that is the end of my commercial. So absolutely. Thank you, Ivano, for being here. Matt Williams, Nick Goss, we love you, man, tremendously. Robert Vance, thank you so much. Thank you for all your comments and questions. And please go and check out some of Dr. Grady McMurtry's. He has one that's called Dinomania. He's got several different versions of that message, and also why he believes in a young earth. There's a 10 video series. They're 10-minute long videos, and he goes through something like 30 or 40 proofs. And he actually gives some that are old earth. He said these are some proofs for the old earth, but he goes through a lot of the proofs for young earth. So check out his stuff, have your questions ready, and come back here on Jew and Greek or Soul Vitamins or Gabriel Bella Music on Thursday night. So God bless you. Jesus loves you. And so do we. Take care. And the video's not going to play, so that's it.
Aww.